Welcome to the Softland Central podcast, your home for market entry knowledge and resources. Softland Central is brought to you by Softland Partners, an online marketplace to help you find best fit resources for your market entry. Find them at softlandpartners.com.
Hi, and welcome to the Softland Central podcast. It's great to have you today. And today we're going to be talking about Victoria, Australia, and particularly companies coming from Victoria, Australia to the U.S. And we're visited and joined by Brian Carnahan with the Victorian Australia Government. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you about this today. I've been doing this for a long time. So again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So, our listeners, our viewers are entrepreneurs and professionals who either are crossing borders or helping companies cross borders. And so, a lot of what we like to discover is not only, kind of about you and your work, but also kind of learn best practices. So if you don't mind, if you would tell us a little bit about your work and what the Victorian government does to support companies that are coming into the U.S.
Sure, Bill. And I've been, again, like I said, I've been doing this now for about 14 years with the Victorian government, and a few years before that with the Commonwealth government of Australia. And so our main objective with companies coming into the U.S. is, we certainly have a lot of similarities here in the U.S. as far as the business environment as what they have in Australia, but there's certainly a lot of differences that we help companies prepare for and have those types of conversations. So a lot of it is advice on the U.S. market, where they might be able to interact, where they can have some successes, and then also, business practices about what they can do to better facilitate their connections here in the U.S. So it's a lot of advice. Now, of course, the Victorian government also has grant programs that are available for companies coming into a new market, international, not just the U.S. market in Canada, but also all across the globe. We have a large network of offices like ours here in San Francisco. So there are grant programs available for companies to grab onto to be able to enhance their outreach into an international market. We also will facilitate trade missions in particular industries to help those companies be introduced to an international market and help them facilitate, the connections that they need in market. So from a financial standpoint, there's those grants that are definitely available. And most of those, though, are administered out of Melbourne, certainly across that. But a lot of it's about working with the companies, finding out what their objectives are, where they are from a business cycle. And companies are going to be all across the board. We have a lot of young entrepreneurs that are coming into Silicon Valley here in San Francisco or headed to New York or Los Angeles for some of those technical communities. And so we also have companies that are quite large, especially in the biopharma space, that do a lot of business already. So we'll have the conversations with them, find out where they are in their business cycle, find out what they're trying to achieve with their next step. And then it's really a bespoke type of engagement with them, trying to help them understand and make connections to get them from point A to point B, whatever those 2 points in their business cycle are.
Wow. So it sounds like there's a fair amount of needs assessment that's done, and you obviously evolve the service and what you do based on the direct needs of the companies. Are there obviously Victoria has some really strong industries, and you mentioned biopharma, and obviously going to Silicon Valley and New York, there's probably fintech and so on. But what are the industries that you're seeing the most interest in U.S. expansion in?
Well, it is across the board, and I'm very much a generalist. So at the moment, I'm working across all industries. So I've got a pretty good insight into that. And biopharma is a lot of the interaction with the companies, just because of the similar in the types of industries down there. That being said, also defense and aerospace. We have a specialist out of our Washington, D.C. office in aerospace and defense because of the close collaboration between Australia and the U.S. There's a lot of companies that are doing business in that in a variety of different ways. Anything tech related, because Melbourne's a very vibrant tech community. So we see a lot of young entrepreneurs wanting to engage here in the U.S. A lot of times they're looking for not only venture partners, but also sometimes just partners as far as collaborating to get into their particular in sector. And it can be fintech, it can be ag tech, whatever it is, but the tech behind it is pretty much a good spot for companies coming into the U.S. That being said, we also do a lot of fun industries like food and beverage, mostly wine. There's a lot of wine coming from Australia into the U.S. We have some really nice Victorian wines that have had some really nice spots here in the U.S. to make some expansion, that type of thing. And they're really, really nice wines. And that's kind of a fun industry when you're out talking with people, that type of thing. Much different than tech or biopharma. But also in the food space, there's a lot of unique niche food products coming out of Australia that have a lot of interest here in the U.S. As far as consumer goods, beauty and wellness products also have a pretty good niche here, and we have some fairly large companies in that space that are coming into the U.S. So I tell companies when I do presentations, it's almost any industry that has some in Australia where they've had success. There's probably a niche here in the U.S. that they can approach, as long as they have a value and a differentiation from the products here. They're not going to come and compete on a price basis in most cases. So really, it's in most industries, if they have that value and a product that has differentiation from what's available here already, they probably have some opportunities in the U.S. We just have to go out and find where they are.
That's fantastic. So you obviously have been doing this for a while, both with the Australian government and now the Victorian government. And I'm sure you've seen a real continuum in terms of the companies that expand well and successfully and sort of scale as they enter the U.S. And then those that are more challenged. What would you say are some of the attributes or habits or circumstances that allow the companies that are ultimately successful in their expansion versus those that may not do quite as well?
Well, yeah, there is a big differentiation in companies that have a high degree of success and some that don't have that same success. And a lot of it has to do with getting a good business plan in place, because a company coming to the U.S. isn't generally going to make a great impact within the first year. Sometimes it's even 2 to 3 years. So they have to have a business plan where they are funding themselves for anywhere from 2 to 5 years for them to see success. And then also part of that is they have to have a commitment for time. So the founders or somebody from the organization needs to be here in the U.S. and Canada to be able to expand that business. And even if they're looking and they find a partner or a distributor or somebody that takes on their products, there's a big time commitment, because they want to make sure that partner is on message with what they're trying to deliver. Because if you find a distributor that's excited about it, but they're not delivering your message, it can cause some issues. So it's really that time commitment by companies and taking a proactive stance to pushing their company to be successful. Companies that maybe find a partner, depend upon that partner to do everything for them, can face some challenges if that partner is not on message. So it is a time commitment, and that time commitment is a financial commitment also. And if they have a financial commitment that's only going to last 2 years, they may be disappointed. Because we've seen some companies that are here 5 to 10 years and have some really huge success. We had a company, A-Connects, which actually, this is probably 10 years ago, they came into the U.S. market, and they were very aggressive, and their founders were aggressive, and they put someone in market and they developed the product. And it was a software as a service type of a thing in the construction industry. But they committed to it and they spent the time to do that. And then they had a $1 billion exit by Oracle a couple of years ago. So again, it's that time commitment and budget commitment to the U.S. In order to be successful. And that's I really see that as a difference between some companies. It's hard to fly in and fly out, once or twice a year and be successful here.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. The image that came up in my head as you were talking about sort of dedicated time and also the sort of urgency to to get going. I always think of it almost like an hourglass where the sand is going down. And I think, most people that talk about international expansion, at least what I hear a lot about, we got to have funding, that, you got to have the right team. But I think to highlight really what I heard from you is that it's also how do you use your time? How do you leverage your time? And the way I guess I've seen it over time is that the commitment of whether it's the investors or the people you hire in market or your team that's supporting them, from Australia, any of the, whether it's clients or whatnot, but that whole sort of community that you've built that's sort of supporting that expansion are only committed for a certain amount of time. And it's different with each of them. The salespeople, if they don't see some success, obviously their income is variable. They'll go, as you know, the sales market is so competitive here. They'll go find something that, will reward them better. And the investors are the same and so on. And so, it's a very difficult formula to sort of figure out the balance between, it seems like the urgency of it, and also, sort of quality execution and so on. But there is I suppose, a finite timeline for success to keep the whole sort of support network together.
Yeah, it is. And that kind of comes back to that time commitment. They have to have somebody in market following up on that. If your salespeople aren't making sales and aren't making money from that, they're going to go someplace else. So, what's that? That comes down to training the salespeople on the product, or even sales training, whatever that might be. It's just a commitment to that success. And then again, not depending on anybody else. If a company coming across, from Australia, which is a long distance, you can't really depend on somebody else for your success, at least initially, unless you find that a really, really good partner to do that type of thing. And even that case, you have to get that partner at the right spot for them to be successful, and also give them the right incentives to be successful. Because sometimes the margins are a little bit higher here, depending on what the product is that you have to give away for that success. But that's part of doing business, and that's something you have to learn by being here and committed to growing your company.
No, it makes total sense. So one last question is, are there any particular resources that you're looking for that would help any of the companies that you're working with coming into the U.S. market?
Well, actually, resources are a big thing, because we're a relatively small office here in the U.S. at the point. As I said, I'm a generalist, so I rely on service providers to provide a lot of different types of resources to me and to our companies. I can't even begin to be an expert in biopharma and mining and tech companies, and unfortunately, I'm not quite that smart. But I will reach out, and my job is I build networks for our companies. So if I get a company, regardless of what industry are, and they come to me, we find out where they are, where they need to be, and then I will connect them to a network that I've built up to actually help them get to that point. A network of experienced execs. It includes attorneys. It includes immigration attorneys, it includes business attorneys, and all the different types of things, 3PL organizations that they've got to connect with. And so the resources that I look for are those networks of service providers that can help our companies coming across, because we can help more that way. So I leverage as much of those types of things as possible. And that's what I commit to the companies that I talk with, that I might not know exactly where you need to be or what you're doing, but I'll commit to finding a network that will help you get to that point.
Yeah, no, that's such great wisdom. We've had a bunch of successful founders who have internationalized on our podcast over time, and that 100% of those we've interviewed have said the number one success factor for them was the networks they were able to tap into and create when they were expanding, and the ability to connect, whether it was resources or information that somehow really help them expand successfully. So yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
really is very aligned with what we hear as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll give a plug to Softland Partners. It's a great place to meet a lot of those types of resources that I'm actually looking for, and probably other economic development agencies are looking for also.
It's very kind. Well, Brian, this has been fantastic, and thank you for taking your time. And I'll make sure we put a link to your agency and also your email in the footer too. So if folks want to reach out or they have interest in coming from Victoria to the U.S. and so on, that they can get a hold of you.
Great. I appreciate that, Bill. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. And to our viewers, make sure that you like and subscribe and come back for more interesting conversations.
I